I'm Audrey Mitchell, 32, and I stood frozen at the front desk of the Grand Sapphire Hotel in Chicago, watching my brother Nathan pretend he didn't recognize me. Despite my confirmed reservation, he smugly informed me they were fully booked. Through the lobby window, I spotted my parents averting their gaze, a coordinated family rejection. Exhaustion from my flight and meetings dissolved into shock, then quiet resolve. They were so busy shutting me out they never bothered to check who signed their paychecks. For 6 months, I'd been the anonymous owner of not just this hotel, but the entire chain. Before I get into my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever been underestimated by family. Trust me, you'll want to see how this plays out. Growing up in Seattle, I always knew I was different from the rest of my family. While my parents and brother Nathan seemed to fit together like perfectly matched puzzle pieces, I was the odd shape that never quite connected. Our middle-class home in the suburbs looked picture-perfect from the outside, but inside, the dynamic was clear. Nathan was the golden child, and I was, well, the other one. My earliest memory of this difference came at my 5th birthday party. My parents had invited the whole neighborhood, decorated the backyard with balloons, and ordered a custom cake. As everyone gathered to sing, my father announced, "And after we celebrate Audrey, we have special news. Nathan has been accepted into the gifted program at school." Just like that, my birthday became about my brother's achievement. I learned to smile through moments like these, but they accumulated like tiny paper cuts over the years. School was my refuge. While Nathan excelled at sports, the path my father, a former high school quarterback, had envisioned for his children. I found my place in business club and mathematics competitions. My mother would attend Nathan's every game, cheering loudly from the stands, but when I won the state economics competition in 10th grade, she merely nodded and said, "That's nice, dear. But wouldn't you rather join the cheerleading squad? It would help you make more friends." Their vision for my future was as predictable as it was limiting. "Audrey, nursing is such a stable career for a woman," my mother would say. Or teaching. Something practical. When I expressed interest in business or entrepreneurship, my father would chuckle. "That's a tough world, sweetheart. Very competitive. Maybe something gentler would suit you better." Despite their doubts, I applied to business schools in secret. When my acceptance letter from Northwestern arrived, complete with a partial scholarship, they couldn't hide their disappointment. "All that money for a business degree?" my father questioned. "Nathan's pre-med track makes sense. Doctors always have work. But business? That's risky." I persisted, moving to Chicago against their wishes. The first year was tough but exhilarating. I excelled in my classes and secured a competitive internship. When I called home with the news, my mother sighed. "We were just talking about how well Nathan is doing in organic chemistry. He might graduate early." Then came the pivotal moment that would ultimately set us on diverging paths. Halfway through my 2nd year, I discovered a startup incubator program that seemed tailor-made for the business concept I'd been developing. The application deadline was the same day as my nursing school entrance exam, the compromise I'd reluctantly made with my parents, who were partially supporting my education. "You promised," my mother said when I called to explain why I wouldn't be taking the exam. "We're not paying for you to chase delusions of grandeur, Audrey." I dropped out the next day, withdrew my remaining tuition money, and threw myself completely into my business plan. It was terrifying and liberating all at once. For months, I barely slept, working 3 jobs while developing my concept at night. When I finally secured my first investor meeting, I called my parents, hoping they might finally see my potential. "That's nice, honey," my father said distractedly. "Did you hear Nathan got into Johns Hopkins? Top of his class." As the years passed and my career began to take shape, our relationship deteriorated further. Every achievement of mine was minimized, every setback was met with an "I told you so." When my first business venture failed, a mobile app for hotel service optimization, my father didn't hesitate. "Not everyone is cut out for the business world, Audrey. There's no shame in coming home and trying something more your speed." I didn't go home. Instead, I learned from my mistakes, refined my approach, and tried again. And again. With each attempt, I gained knowledge, connections, and resilience. By the time I turned 29, I had developed a profitable hospitality consulting firm and was making more money than my parents had ever seen. Not that they knew, I'd learned to keep the details of my life private, tired of having my successes diminished. The final break came 3 years ago. My parents called out of the blue, their voices unusually warm. They wanted to meet for dinner during their Chicago visit. For the first time in years, they asked questions about my work, seemed impressed by my answers. I allowed myself to hope that perhaps they were finally seeing me clearly. Then over dessert, they revealed the true purpose of their visit. Nathan had opened a small medical practice but was struggling financially. They had remortgaged their house to help him and were now facing foreclosure. They needed $200,000. We wouldn't ask if it wasn't important, my mother said. Family helps family. I sat there, stunned by the audacity. After years of dismissing my career, they now saw me as an ATM. Have you asked Nathan to economize? Maybe scale back the practice until it's profitable? I suggested. My father's face darkened. Nathan is doing important work. He's saving lives, Audrey. What do you do? Help rich hotels get richer? I declined to give them the money, instead offering to review Nathan's business plan and suggest improvements. They left the restaurant before the check arrived. The next day, my extended family began calling, one by one, to tell me how selfish I was. I learned that my parents and Nathan had been characterizing me as a cold-hearted businesswoman who had abandoned her family for years. The silence that followed was deafening. Birthday cards stopped. Holiday invitations disappeared. When my grandmother died 6 months later, I discovered that the funeral had already taken place. No one had bothered to tell me. The pain was excruciating, but clarity followed. I channeled my hurt into building something that no one, especially not my family, could dismiss. I worked harder, networked smarter, and within a year, had the opportunity to join a venture capital group focusing on undervalued hospitality properties. Then, 8 months ago, I discovered something that changed everything. While researching potential acquisition targets, I came across the struggling Sapphire Hotel Group. And there, listed as the manager of their Chicago flagship location, was a familiar name, Nathan Mitchell. Further digging revealed my parents had also joined the hotel staff after losing their home, my father as a maintenance supervisor, my mother in guest relations. They had been there for nearly 2 years. A plan began to form. The Sapphire Group was undervalued but had potential. With the right management and strategic investments, it could be transformed. I presented the acquisition proposal to my investors, created a shell company to hide my involvement, and 6 months ago, became the new owner of the entire chain, 18 properties across the country. I kept my identity hidden from everyone except a small executive team at headquarters. I implemented changes remotely, improved conditions for workers, and watched the hotels begin to flourish. All while my family remained completely unaware that their employer, the person signing their paychecks and determining their futures, was the daughter and sister they had rejected. Which brings me to last week, when I decided it was finally time to check into the Chicago Grand Sapphire Hotel in person. My journey from rejected daughter to hotel magnate wasn't a straight path. After that final dinner with my parents 3 years ago, I threw myself into work with an intensity that alarmed even my closest friends. The pain of family rejection became fuel for late nights and early mornings. If I couldn't earn their approval, I'd earn something they couldn't ignore: undeniable success. Before the family fallout, I'd been living in a decent 1-bedroom apartment in Lincoln Park. After declining to bail out Nathan's practice, I downsized to a tiny studio in a less desirable neighborhood, cutting my expenses to the bone. Every dollar saved went into my business and personal development. My daily routine became punishing. I'd wake at 4:30 a.m. to review industry news and work on business strategies before heading to my consulting job at 7 a.m. Evenings were split between client meetings and my side hustle, developing a proprietary hotel management software that could track and optimize everything from energy usage to staff scheduling. Weekends were for networking events and educational workshops. Sleep became a luxury I rarely afforded myself. The first version of my hotel management platform was a disaster. I'd invested $50,000, nearly all my savings, into development, only to discover critical flaws in the programming that rendered it unusable. 3 potential clients walked away, and my reputation took a hit. For a week, I barely left my apartment, alternating between crying and staring blankly at the ceiling. "Your family was right," a voice in my head taunted. "You're not cut out for this." On the 8th day of my pity party, my phone rang. It was Samantha Hayes, a retired hotel executive I'd met at a conference months earlier. We'd exchanged cards, but I never expected her to call. "I heard about your software issues," she said without preamble. "Everyone fails, Audrey. What matters is what you do next." That call changed everything. Samantha became the mentor I desperately needed, and the maternal figure my own mother had never been. She was tough but fair, pushing me to examine why my software had failed and how to avoid similar pitfalls in the future. "You're thinking too broadly," she told me over coffee a few days later. "You're trying to solve every problem at once. Focus on one issue that keeps hotel managers up at night, solve it brilliantly, then expand." With Samantha's guidance, I narrowed my focus to energy efficiency, a major cost center for hotels that few management systems addressed effectively. I cobbled together enough money for a scaled-back development process, working directly with the programmers this time. 6 months later, Energy Pulse was born, a sleek, user-friendly system that could reduce a hotel's energy costs by up to 22%. My first client was a small boutique hotel in Milwaukee whose owner was willing to take a chance on my unproven system. The results exceeded even my optimistic projections: 26% energy savings in the first quarter. Word spread quickly in the close-knit Midwest hospitality community. By the end of that year, I had contracts with 11 hotels and was hiring my first employees. Energy Pulse evolved into Hospitality Pulse, incorporating modules for staff scheduling, inventory management, and predictive maintenance. Each edition came from directly observing pain points in the industry and developing targeted solutions. My consulting background gave me insights that purely tech-focused competitors lacked. As the business grew, I made a critical decision: I would never be the public face of the company. The trauma of my family's rejection had left me wary of personal attention. Instead, I hired a charismatic COO to handle media interviews and industry events while I worked behind the scenes as the strategic brain of the operation. For years after that disastrous first attempt, Hospitality Pulse was valued at $15 million. I sold it to a larger hospitality tech conglomerate for $18 million, retaining an advisory role and negotiating an excellent compensation package that included significant stock options. The once struggling consultant who could barely afford ramen was now a millionaire many times over. Most people would have celebrated, perhaps bought a luxury condo or taken an extravagant vacation. I did neither. The money meant little to me beyond the security and opportunities it provided. What I truly wanted couldn't be purchased: a family that valued me for who I was, not what I could give them. With Samantha's encouragement, I channeled my newfound wealth and industry reputation into a new venture, joining Horizon Ventures, a VC firm specializing in hospitality investments. My unique perspective, understanding both the operational and technological aspects of hotels, made me a valuable addition to their team. Within a year, I was leading their acquisition committee, evaluating struggling properties with untapped potential. That's when fate threw me a curveball. While researching acquisition targets, an analyst dropped a folder on my desk. "The Sapphire Group," she said. 18 properties, solid bones, terrible management. Classic turnaround opportunity. I flipped through the documents, only half listening until a familiar name jumped out at me: Nathan Mitchell, General Manager, Chicago Grand Sapphire. My brother. Further investigation revealed my parents had also joined the hotel staff after losing their home, the same home they'd remortgaged to fund Nathan's failing medical practice. The coincidence was too perfect to ignore. Here was an opportunity not just for a sound business investment, but for something I'd never dared hope for, the chance to prove my worth to the very people who had dismissed me. Not through words, they'd never listened to those, but through irrefutable success. I approached the acquisition methodically, creating a complex structure of shell companies to mask my involvement. Horizon Ventures would be the public face of the deal, but my personal investment fund would be the majority stakeholder. Only 3 people at Horizon knew my true connection: the CEO, the legal counsel, and my mentor Samantha, who had joined as a senior advisor after her retirement. The purchase was finalized 6 months ago. I immediately implemented sweeping changes across the chain, focusing initially on employee satisfaction. Better benefits, clearer advancement opportunities, and comprehensive training programs. Happy staff create happy guests, a simple principle many hospitality groups forget. I was careful to approve these changes through proper channels, never directly involving myself with the Chicago property. Meanwhile, I monitored the Chicago hotel's performance through weekly reports, noting with interest that while overall metrics improved, certain discrepancies appeared in the accounting from Nathan's department. Nothing provably criminal yet, but concerning patterns that warranted further investigation. For 6 months, I remained in the shadows, watching from afar as my family benefited from my business acumen without having any idea. My father received a company-wide maintenance supervisor raise. My mother was recognized in the employee newsletter for guest satisfaction. Nathan featured prominently in regional marketing materials as the face of the Chicago flagship. Part of me wanted to maintain this distance indefinitely. The power dynamic was satisfying in its own way. But deeper reflection revealed an uncomfortable truth: I was still seeking their validation, just through more elaborate means. True healing would require confrontation, not continued subterfuge. And so last week, I booked a room at the Chicago Grand Sapphire Hotel under my own name. No disguises, no pretense. Just Audrey Mitchell, coming home to the empire she had built, ready to face the family that never believed she could build anything at all. Standing in the elegant lobby of the competing Martinique Hotel across the street from the Grand Sapphire, I tried to steady my shaking hands. The rejection had been even worse than I'd anticipated. The look in Nathan's eyes when he pretended not to recognize me, there was no confusion there, only cold calculation. And my parents, visible through the glass doors, deliberately turning away when they spotted me at the front desk. It wasn't just a rejection, it was a performance. My room at the Martinique offered a perfect view of the Grand Sapphire's illuminated facade. I stood at the window, watching staff members come and go, wondering how many of them had heard stories about the owner's terrible daughter who had abandoned her family. The thought made me feel physically ill. "Ms. Mitchell? Your tea service." I turned to find a room service attendant wheeling in a small cart. As she arranged the tea set on the desk, something about her kept drawing my attention. The way she moved, the careful precision of her movements. "Mia? Mia Reynolds?" The woman looked up, surprised, then broke into a wide smile. "Audrey. Oh my goodness, I thought it was you when I saw the name on the order. What are you doing here?" Mia had been my co-worker at the Hyatt during my struggling post-college years. We'd bonded over terrible late-night shifts and shared dreams of something better. We'd lost touch when I left for my consulting job. "I moved to the Martinique last year," she explained, sitting down at my invitation. "The benefits are better. I was at the Sapphire for a while, but..." She hesitated. "But what?" "It's nothing. Just workplace drama. Mia, please. I could use a friend right now." Her expression softened. There was this manager, Nathan Mitchell. Total nightmare. Played favorites, took credit for everyone's ideas. When his parents joined the staff, it got worse. Suddenly they were this little dynasty running the place. Anyone who didn't play along got terrible shifts or was written up for minor infractions. My stomach clenched. "What else did you hear about them?" Mia lowered her voice. Nathan talks about his sister sometimes, especially when he's had a few drinks at staff functions. Says she abandoned the family when they needed her most. Stole money from their parents. Even claimed you sabotaged his medical practice out of jealousy. She shook her head. I never believed it. Didn't sound like the Audrey I knew. Because it wasn't true. Any of it. My voice cracked. Over the next hour, Mia filled in the gaps of my family's narrative. According to them, I had taken advantage of my parents' generosity, borrowed money for school that I never repaid, then cut off contact when they asked for help during a financial emergency. Nathan painted himself as the dutiful son who sacrificed his thriving medical career to support our parents after my betrayal. The worst part is, most people believe them, Mia said. They're so convincing. Your mother shows pictures of Nathan graduating medical school, talks about how proud she is of him for giving up his practice to help them. Your father acts like this wounded patriarch. It's quite the performance. After Mia left, I spent hours scouring social media and reaching out to former mutual connections. The picture that emerged was more disturbing than I'd imagined. My family hadn't just rejected me, they'd systematically erased and replaced me in their narrative, constructing an alternate reality where I was the villain and they were the victims. But something else Mia mentioned kept nagging at me, the financial irregularities at the hotel. Inventory that disappears, expense reports that don't add up, cash-paying guests who don't appear in the system. As the owner, I had access to the hotel's complete financial records, but I'd been reviewing them at a high level, not diving into the granular details of daily operations. That night, I remotely accessed the Sapphire's accounting system, bypassing the normal channels to view the raw data. What I found confirmed my suspicions. Nathan had been embezzling from the hotel for months. Small amounts, carefully distributed across different departments, but adding up to over $120,000. He was skimming from the very company that had given him a second chance. The discovery transformed my pain into something harder, more resolute. This wasn't just about a family who couldn't appreciate me. This was about people who had actively worked to destroy my reputation while stealing from a company they didn't realize belonged to me. The irony would have been amusing if it weren't so infuriating. I called Taylor Chen, my chief financial officer and one of the few people who knew my connection to the Sapphire Group. I need a full forensic audit of the Chicago property, I told her. Quietly. And I need a meeting with the board tomorrow. Does this mean you're finally ready to go public as the owner? Taylor asked. Not yet. But soon. I'm implementing Operation Glass House. I don't know what that means, Audrey. It means, Taylor, that I'm done hiding in the shadows. It's time my family learns exactly who they've been working for, and what happens when they betray not just their daughter, but their employer. After hanging up, I stared again at the Grand Sapphire across the street. The hotel looked different to me now, its gleaming windows reflecting the city lights like knowing eyes. For years, I had channeled my hurt into building something meaningful, hoping that success would be its own reward. I had convinced myself that I'd moved beyond needing my family's approval or recognition. But standing there, looking at the evidence of Nathan's theft and thinking about the elaborate lies they'd constructed about me, I realized I wasn't seeking reconciliation anymore. What I wanted now was justice. Not revenge, I wouldn't stoop to their level, but a reckoning. A moment of truth that would shatter the false narrative they'd created. I pulled out my laptop and began drafting emails to my executive team. Operation Glass House would require precise timing and coordination. By the time my family realized what was happening, it would be too late for them to spin more lies or escape the consequences of their actions. For the first time since being turned away from the hotel that afternoon, I smiled. The rejection that had initially felt like another wound was actually the final piece falling into place. They had given me the perfect opening act for what was to come. Morning brought clarity and purpose. I checked out of the Martinique at dawn, moving to a service department I kept in the financial district under my company's name. The space had the dual advantages of privacy and a dedicated office area from which I could coordinate Operation Glass House without interruption. First, I called a meeting with the Sapphire Group's board of directors, who still didn't know I was the majority owner. The ownership structure I'd created was deliberately complex. Horizon Ventures appeared as the primary investor, with my holding company, Phoenix Acquisitions, listed as a silent partner. Only my CFO Taylor, legal counsel Martin Walsh, and Samantha knew the full truth. The Chicago property is underperforming, I told the board over video conference, using my title as Horizon's acquisition director. The numbers suggest internal issues that need addressing. I'm proposing a surprise audit and evaluation, followed by a special event to announce the chain's new direction. The board approved unanimously, giving me the official authorization I needed to implement my plan without raising suspicions. Immediately after, I convened my trusted inner circle, Taylor, Martin, and Samantha, to share the complete strategy. We'll approach this in 3 phases, I explained, displaying a timeline on my tablet. First, intelligence gathering. Then, evidence collection and preparation. Finally, the revelation event. For phase 1, I created an alter ego. Alexandria Reynolds, a wealthy investor looking to possibly acquire the Sapphire Group from its current owners. I donned a sleek blonde wig, colored contacts, and the kind of ostentatious jewelry I normally avoided. The disguise was theatrical but effective. My own family had proven they saw what they expected to see, not what was actually before them. As Alexandria, I scheduled a private tour of the Chicago Grand Sapphire with none other than the general manager, my brother Nathan. He greeted Alexandria with the unctuous charm he reserved for those he believed could advance his interests. "Ms. Reynolds, what an honor to have you with us today," he gushed, taking my hand a beat too long. "I've personally overseen every aspect of this property's revitalization since the new ownership group took over." "Fascinating," I murmured, letting him believe I was impressed. "And who exactly is this new ownership?" I found the structure rather opaque during my preliminary research. Nathan leaned in conspiratorially. "Between us, it's some venture capital group out of New York. Absentee owners, really. They send directives through management companies, but the day-to-day operations fall to those of us on the ground." He straightened his tie. "Which has been fortunate for the Sapphire. My background in business management has allowed me to implement several profitable initiatives that corporate has now rolled out chain-wide." I bit back a laugh. Nathan's background in business management consisted of a failed medical practice and whatever fabrications he'd put on his resume. And the profitable initiatives he claimed credit for were my innovations, implemented through the proper corporate channels. The tour continued, with Nathan taking credit for virtually every improvement I'd instituted over the past 6 months. When we passed my mother at the concierge desk, he introduced her as one of our most valuable team members without a hint of familial recognition. My mother's eyes flickered over me without a trace of recognition. "Welcome to the Grand Sapphire, Ms. Reynolds. If there's anything you need during your stay, please don't hesitate to ask." "Actually," I said, adopting a slight European accent, "I'm wondering about local entertainment recommendations. For a visitor who's never experienced Chicago before." "Of course." She pulled out a map and began circling locations, her practiced smile never wavering. As she leaned forward, I noticed a photograph on her desk, Nathan in his white coat from medical school, my parents beaming beside him. Of me, there was no trace. It was as if I had never existed. The intelligence-gathering phase continued for 3 days. As Alexandria, I ingratiated myself with key staff members, dropping hints about potential investment and gathering information about the hotel's operations. I learned that Nathan had cultivated a small circle of loyal employees who helped cover his tracks, primarily through manipulating inventory records and creating fake expense reports. I also discovered something unexpected and troubling: my father had been experiencing health problems. During an informal staff gathering at the hotel bar, I overheard a maintenance worker mentioning that old Frank Mitchell had been taken to the emergency room twice in the past month with chest pains. This revelation shook me more than I wanted to admit. Despite everything, the thought of my father being seriously ill created a momentary crack in my resolve. That night, alone in my apartment, I called Samantha. "Am I doing the right thing?" I asked her, pacing the floor. "Dad's health issues complicate things. What if the shock causes him to have a heart attack?" Samantha's voice was gentle but firm. "Audrey, your father's health doesn't excuse years of emotional abuse and manipulation. It doesn't justify the lies they've spread about you or the money your brother is stealing from your company." "I know, but..." "No buts. You're not planning to harm them, you're planning to reveal the truth. If the truth is harmful to them, that's a consequence of their actions, not yours." She paused. "That said, we can take precautions. Have medical personnel on standby during the revelation event. Approach it with dignity rather than dramatic flair." Her words steadied me. I was seeking justice, not vengeance. The distinction was crucial, and I would make sure to maintain it throughout what was to come. The next day, I moved to Phase 2, evidence collection and preparation. As the owner, I had legal authority to access all the hotel's systems, but I needed to document Nathan's embezzlement in a way that would stand up to scrutiny and couldn't be dismissed as a personal vendetta. Working with Martin, my legal counsel, I commissioned a thorough forensic audit under the guise of a routine financial review. The auditors, who had no knowledge of my connection to the Mitchell family, methodically documented discrepancies, traced financial irregularities, and compiled evidence of systematic theft. Meanwhile, Taylor arranged for a special event at the hotel, a charity gala ostensibly hosted by Horizon Ventures to announce exciting changes for the Sapphire Group. The guest list included industry leaders, local dignitaries, and business press, witnesses to what would unfold. Most importantly, attendance was mandatory for all senior staff, including the hotel's general manager and department heads. As preparations continued, I received a call from Jessica Parker, the hotel's head of housekeeping and someone I'd connected with during my Alexandria charade. "Ms. Reynolds? This is Jessica from the Sapphire. Something strange is happening here. There's an audit going on, and Mr. Mitchell is freaking out. He's having staff move boxes of documents to his car, and he's deleted a bunch of files from the main office computer." This was concerning but not unexpected. "Thank you for telling me, Jessica. Just keep observing and let me know if anything else happens." "There's something else." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I've worked here for 10 years, through 3 different management companies. I've seen people come and go, but I've never seen anything like the Mitchell family. The way they talk about his sister, it's disturbing. Like they're obsessed with erasing her. There are rumors among the longtime staff that the things they say about her aren't true." "What kinds of things?" I asked, curious about the hotel grapevine. "That she stole from them, abandoned them. But Maria in accounting worked with her at the Hyatt years ago, and she says Audrey Mitchell was the hardest working, most honest person she knew. Something doesn't add up." I thanked Jessica for her insight, promising that the truth would come to light soon. After hanging up, I sat in silence for several minutes. Even with all my success, all my careful planning, part of me had still doubted. Had wondered if perhaps I was overreacting, if my family's behavior wasn't as calculated as it seemed. Jessica's call erased those doubts. The Mitchell family wasn't just dysfunctional, they were actively malicious. The final piece of Phase 2 involved securing the evidence Nathan was trying to destroy. Using my owner access codes, I remotely locked him out of the hotel's financial systems and dispatched security to secure the remaining physical documents. Then I authorized IT to recover the deleted files, which, unbeknownst to Nathan, were automatically backed up to a secure server every hour. By week's end, we had compiled irrefutable evidence of Nathan's embezzlement, along with documentation of the false narrative my family had been spreading about me throughout the company. The stage was set for the final phase of Operation Glass House, the revelation event that would change everything. The night before the gala, I returned to my apartment to find Samantha waiting for me with a garment bag. "You can't face them looking like a business automaton," she said, unzipping the bag to reveal a stunning emerald gown. "Tomorrow isn't just about exposing them, Audrey. It's about reclaiming your power. Your identity. As I tried on the dress, Samantha watched with the pride of a mother seeing her daughter off to prom, the kind of pride my own mother had never shown me. Are you nervous? She asked. Terrified, I admitted. But also ready. Does that make sense? She nodded, adjusting the drape of the fabric. Perfect sense. You've spent your life being the person they refuse to see. Tomorrow, you'll be impossible to ignore. Standing before the mirror, I hardly recognized myself. Not because of the elegant dress or the professional makeup Samantha had arranged, but because of the confidence in my eyes. The woman reflected back at me wasn't defined by rejection or approval-seeking. She was defined by her own strength, her own achievements, her own truth. Tomorrow, I whispered to my reflection, the glass house shatters. The morning of the gala brought an unexpected development. Martin, my legal counsel, arrived at my apartment with a large file box and a grim expression. You asked me to investigate any other financial irregularities involving your family, he said, placing the box on my dining table. I found something you need to see. Inside were bank statements, loan applications, and legal correspondence dating back 5 years, all obtained through proper legal channels as part of our embezzlement investigation. The documents told a story far more disturbing than I had anticipated. 5 years ago, when I was just beginning to find success with my consulting business, my parents had approached a private lender for a $300,000 loan. The stated purpose, investment in daughter's business venture. The collateral, their house. I never received any investment from them, I said, confused. They've never given me a dime since I left for college. Martin nodded. Keep reading. The loan had been approved, but the money never went to any business venture. Instead, it was transferred directly to Nathan for his medical practice. When the practice failed and they defaulted on the loan payments, they applied for a second loan, this time using my name and social security number without my knowledge. That's identity theft, I whispered, shocked by the betrayal. Yes, and fraud, Martin confirmed. They forged your signature on multiple documents. When this second loan also fell into default, that's when they approached you directly for money. I sat back, stunned. So when I refused to give them $200,000 3 years ago, they were actually trying to cover up their fraudulent activity. They needed the money not just to save Nathan's practice, but to avoid potential criminal charges for the identity theft and loan fraud they'd committed in your name. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. I had always known my family favored Nathan, had always felt like an outsider, but this was beyond favoritism. They had been willing to destroy my financial future, my credit, my reputation, all to prop up my brother's failing business venture. Further investigation revealed more betrayals. Old emails between my parents and Nathan discussing how to leverage Audrey's success for their benefit. A draft of a business plan for Nathan's practice that plagiarized ideas directly from proposals I had shared with them years earlier. A letter from my father to a family friend describing me as difficult and selfish for pursuing my own career instead of helping support Nathan's more important medical work. Most devastating of all was a series of emails to extended family members after I refused the $200,000 loan. My mother had systematically contacted aunts, uncles, and cousins with an elaborate fiction. I had borrowed $150,000 from them for my business, refused to repay it despite my luxury lifestyle, and then cruelly cut off contact when they faced financial hardship. These emails went out the same day you met them for dinner, Martin pointed out. They were planning to vilify you regardless of your answer. The evidence was overwhelming. This wasn't just family dysfunction or misunderstanding. This was calculated, ongoing betrayal spanning years. They had never seen me as a daughter or sister worthy of support, only as a resource to be exploited for Nathan's benefit. I sat motionless at my dining table, surrounded by the paper trail of their deception. The pain was so intense it felt physical, like someone had reached into my chest and squeezed my heart until it threatened to burst. For a moment, I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Then my phone rang. It was Taylor. Audrey, I'm so sorry to add to what you're dealing with, but we found something else. Her voice was gentle but urgent. Nathan tried to transfer $50,000 from the hotel's accounts this morning. When the system blocked him, he tried to remove computer equipment from the administrative offices. Security stopped him, but he's making a scene, threatening to call the police. We need your guidance. The call snapped me back to the present moment. I could fall apart later. Right now, I had a company to protect and a long overdue confrontation to prepare for. Have security escort him to his office and keep him there, I instructed. Tell him the system freeze is a routine security measure during the audit, and everything will be explained at the gala tonight. Do not let him leave the premises or make any financial transactions. After hanging up, I turned to Martin. Add identity theft and loan fraud to the evidence presentation for tonight. And contact the appropriate authorities, we'll need them on standby. Throughout the day, I moved through preparations with mechanical precision, my emotions locked away behind a wall of professionalism. I reviewed the evidence, finalized my presentation, and coordinated with the team handling tonight's revelation. But inside, I was in turmoil. At 4 o'clock, I received an unexpected visit from Mia, my former coworker who now worked at the Martinique. I thought you might need a friend, she said simply, carrying a bag of comfort food and a bottle of wine. Today must be hard. Her kindness broke through my carefully constructed facade. For the first time since discovering the full extent of my family's betrayal, I allowed myself to cry. Not delicate tears, but ugly, gut-wrenching sobs that left me gasping for breath. They never loved me, I managed between sobs. Not once. Not ever. Mia held me while I cried, not offering platitudes or solutions, just the simple comfort of human connection. When the storm passed, she helped me wash my face and opened the wine. You know what's getting me through this? I said, accepting a glass. The people who did believe in me. Samantha. Taylor. Even you, Mia, remembering me as hardworking and honest when my own family was painting me as a thief and a liar. You built your own family, Mia observed. People who see you for who you really are. The truth of her words resonated deeply. While I had been obsessing over the family that rejected me, I had been surrounded by people who chose me, who valued me, who supported me without conditions or expectations. As evening approached, Samantha arrived with the makeup artist and stylist she'd arranged. We said goodbye to Mia, who promised to check in tomorrow, and began the transformation process. Remember, Samantha said as the makeup artist worked, tonight isn't just about exposing them. It's about standing in your truth. No matter what happens, you've already won by building a life and a company that reflects your values. By 7 o'clock, I was ready, not just physically, but emotionally. The heartbreak and shock had hardened into resolve. I wasn't seeking my family's approval anymore, I was beyond that now. What I wanted was accountability, truth, and the freedom that would come from finally closing this painful chapter of my life. As we prepared to leave for the Grand Sapphire, Taylor called one last time. Everything is in place, she confirmed. The audiovisual setup is tested and working. Security is briefed. Medical personnel are on standby, as requested. The board members have arrived and are enjoying cocktails in the mezzanine. She paused. And Audrey? Nathan's still there, along with your parents. They have no idea what's coming. I ended the call and took one final look in the mirror. The woman who gazed back at me wasn't a rejected daughter seeking validation. She was Audrey Mitchell, successful entrepreneur and hotel chain owner, ready to reclaim her narrative and her power. Let's go, I told Samantha, picking up my clutch. It's time for the Mitchell family reunion. The drive to the Grand Sapphire Hotel was surreal. Streetside walked as a struggling student, now viewed from the back of a luxury town car. Buildings that had witnessed my tears after failed investor meetings, now mere backdrop to my triumph. Chicago had been the stage for both my greatest disappointments and my most significant successes. Tonight, it would witness the culmination of both. Remember to breathe, Samantha advised from beside me, elegant in midnight blue. No matter what happens in there, you've already won. I nodded, mentally reviewing the meticulous plan we'd developed. The charity gala was ostensibly to announce new initiatives for the Sapphire Hotel group, which was true, just not in the way my family expected. 200 guests would be in attendance, industry leaders, investors, media, and hotel staff. A perfectly public setting for a long overdue reckoning. Upon arrival, we bypassed the main entrance for a service door where Taylor waited with security personnel. The hotel staff who recognized me from my Alexandria Reynolds persona looked confused by my transformed appearance and the deference being shown to me. Everything set, Taylor confirmed, leading us to a private conference room that had been converted into a command center. Screens displayed security camera feeds from throughout the hotel, focusing particularly on the grand ballroom where guests were gathering, and the mezzanine where board members awaited my arrival. Your family's movements? I asked, scanning the monitors. Your brother is networking aggressively with board members, likely trying to gauge what's happening with the audit. Your mother is supervising staff at the reception desk. Your father called in sick today. That last bit gave me pause. Is he here for the event? Taylor nodded. Arrived 20 minutes ago. He doesn't look well, but he's here. I felt a twinge of concern despite everything. Make sure the medical team knows to keep an eye on him specifically. The next hour was spent in final preparations. I reviewed the evidence presentation with Martin, ensuring all documentation was clear and irrefutable. We'd organized it chronologically, first Nathan's embezzlement from the hotel, then the broader pattern of family deception, including the identity theft and loan fraud. The evidence would be displayed on screens throughout the ballroom at key moments during my speech. At 8:30 p.m., I met briefly with the Sapphire Group's board of directors, who still believed I was merely Horizon Ventures acquisition director. They knew something significant was happening, the audit, the security presence, the elaborate event. But not the personal connection at its heart. Tonight will involve some difficult revelations about the Chicago properties management, I told them. I ask that you reserve judgment until all evidence has been presented. By 9 p.m., the ballroom was filled with elegantly dressed guests enjoying cocktails and appetizers. From my vantage point on the mezzanine, I could see Nathan working the room, his charm offensive in full swing. My mother fluttered at the edges, occasionally joining conversations when introduced by Nathan. My father sat at a table near the back, looking pale but present. None of them had any idea that their employer, the woman signing their paychecks, approving their vacation requests, determining their professional futures, was the daughter and sister they had rejected and defamed. For the first time that night, I smiled. You look like a jungle cat about to pounce, Samantha observed, joining me at the railing. Is that wrong? I asked. To feel satisfaction about what's coming? She considered this. It would be wrong to enjoy their pain. It's not wrong to anticipate justice and vindication. I let her words sink in, recalibrating my emotions. This wasn't about revenge, it was about truth. The distinction was important. At 9:30 p.m., the hotel's event director called for attention and introduced a special announcement from Horizon Ventures. This was my cue. The physical transformation I'd undergone for tonight wasn't just cosmetic, it was symbolic. Gone were the practical business suits and minimal makeup I typically wore. Tonight I wore power like a second skin, the emerald gown that complemented my eyes, hair styled in elegant waves, makeup that emphasized rather than minimized my features. I looked like what I was, a woman who owned the room, literally and figuratively. As I approached the grand staircase that would take me down to the ballroom floor and the podium, Samantha squeezed my hand one last time. Remember who you are, she whispered. Not who they tried to make you believe you were. I descended the stairs slowly, aware of the room's attention shifting to me. Near the bottom, I caught sight of Nathan's face as recognition dawned, first confusion, then shock, quickly masked by a strained smile. He hadn't expected me to be here, but he was adaptable, already calculating how to control the narrative. My mother's reaction was less composed. She paled visibly, clutching a nearby chair for support. My father remained seated, his expression unreadable from this distance. I reached the podium and adjusted the microphone, scanning the room slowly, deliberately making eye contact with board members, investors, and finally, my family. "Good evening," I began, my voice steady and clear. "For those who don't know me, my name is Audrey Mitchell. I'm the acquisition director for Horizon Ventures, and I have some important announcements about the future of the Sapphire Hotel Group." Nathan's posture relaxed slightly. He thought he understood my role now, just another corporate representative making announcements. He had no idea that I was just getting started. "But before I discuss the future," I continued, "I need to address some serious issues affecting the present. Specifically, financial irregularities at this flagship location that have been uncovered during our recent audit." Now Nathan tensed again, his smile freezing in place. My mother began moving toward him, maternal instinct overriding professional decorum. "However," I said, "this isn't just a story about corporate malfeasance. It's also a deeply personal one." I paused, looking directly at my family. "Because the general manager responsible for these irregularities, Nathan Mitchell, is my brother. And the parents who have enabled his behavior are my own." A murmur ran through the crowd. Nathan's face contorted with a mix of rage and panic. My mother reached him, gripping his arm as if to physically restrain him from whatever he might do next. "What many of you don't know, what even the board hasn't known until this moment, is that I am not just an acquisition director for Horizon Ventures. For the past 6 months, through my holding company Phoenix Acquisitions, I have been the majority owner of the entire Sapphire Hotel Group." The room erupted in gasps and whispers. Board members exchanged shocked glances. Nathan took an involuntary step backward, nearly tripping over a chair. I raised a hand for silence, which fell almost immediately. In that moment, I felt the full weight of my position, my achievement, my vindication. 3 years ago, my family had dismissed me from a restaurant, believing they were cutting ties with a failed businesswoman who had nothing to offer them. Now they stood frozen in a hotel I owned, surrounded by colleagues who reported to me, as I controlled the narrative they had worked so hard to falsify. "Tonight," I continued, meeting Nathan's gaze directly, "the truth comes out. All of it. And there will be consequences." The ballroom of the Grand Sapphire Hotel gleamed with understated luxury. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over elegant table settings. A string quartet played softly in the corner. The charity gala, ostensibly benefiting education for hospitality workers, had drawn Chicago's business elite, hotel industry leaders, and local media. The perfect audience for what was about to unfold. My announcement, that I, Audrey Mitchell, was the owner of the Sapphire Hotel Group, had created a ripple of shock through the crowd. Board members were visibly stunned. Industry colleagues whispered behind cocktail napkins. But the most dramatic reactions came from the 3 people who should have known me best, my family. Nathan had recovered enough to force a smile, though sweat beaded along his hairline. Always the performer, he was already calculating how to spin this revelation to his advantage. My mother had gone deathly pale, her social smile frozen in place. My father, still seated at his table near the back, stared with an unreadable expression, part confusion, part something that might have been fear. "Security," I said clearly into the microphone, "please ensure that all exits remain accessible but monitored. No one is being detained, but I do ask that certain individuals remain for the duration of this presentation." 4 security officers moved to positions near the ballroom doors, professional, unobtrusive, but unmistakably present. Nathan's eyes darted between them, his forced smile slipping. "As I was saying," I continued, "the recent audit of this property has uncovered serious financial irregularities. Rather than speak in generalities, allow me to be specific." I nodded to Taylor, who activated the ballroom's presentation system. Screens around the room lit up with financial records, transaction logs, and security footage, all meticulously documented evidence of Nathan's embezzlement. Over the past 6 months, approximately $120,000 has been systematically diverted from hotel accounts through a variety of methods: falsified expense reports, inventory manipulation, and unrecorded cash transactions. I scrolled through highlighted examples on the screens. The evidence is conclusive and has been shared with the appropriate authorities. Nathan stepped forward, his charm offensive ready. There's clearly been a misunderstanding. Please wait to speak until I've finished, Mr. Mitchell, I interrupted, my tone pleasant but firm. You'll have your opportunity to respond to all charges. His mouth snapped shut, and used to being denied the floor. Across the room, I noticed Jessica, the head of housekeeping who had alerted me to Nathan's document shredding, giving me a subtle nod of approval. While the financial misconduct is serious, it's actually not the most disturbing issue we've uncovered. I signaled Taylor again, and the screens changed to display emails, social media posts, and staff interviews, all documenting the false narrative my family had been spreading about me throughout the company. For those who don't know the background, allow me to provide context. The Mitchell family, my family, has been employed by this hotel for approximately 2 years. During that time, they have systematically spread falsehoods about me to colleagues, staff, and management. According to them, I abandoned the family during financial hardship, stole money, and cut off contact out of selfishness. I paused, looking directly at my mother. None of this is true. The screens now displayed the evidence Martin had uncovered, the fraudulent loan applications using my identity, the emails plotting to leverage my success, the systematic campaign to vilify me to extended family. The truth is considerably more troubling. When I refused to give my family $200,000 3 years ago, money I didn't have at the time, they responded by cutting me off completely and creating an elaborate fiction to justify their actions. What I didn't know until recently was that they had already committed identity theft and loan fraud in my name, and were attempting to cover up those crimes with my money. The room had gone completely silent. Even the string quartet had stopped playing, the musicians watching the drama unfold with undisguised interest. Nathan finally broke the silence, stepping forward with the confident air of someone accustomed to controlling narratives. Audrey, this is hardly the venue for airing family grievances. Whatever misunderstandings have occurred. This is not a misunderstanding, Nathan, I cut in, my voice level. This is fraud. This is theft. This is a systematic campaign of defamation. All documented, all verifiable, all illegal. His confidence wavered. You're twisting things. Am I? I nodded to Taylor again, and a new image appeared on the screens, a bank statement showing a transfer attempt Nathan had made that morning, trying to move $50,000 from hotel accounts to his personal bank. A murmur ran through the crowd. Nathan's face flushed deep red. That was a legitimate transfer for vendor payments, he sputtered. Standard procedure. To your personal account? For vendors who don't exist? I raised an eyebrow. The audit team found no record of these supposed vendors in any hotel system. What they did find was evidence of your gambling debts. Is that where the missing $120,000 went, Nathan? He took a step toward me, fists clenched. Immediately, 2 security officers moved closer. He froze, suddenly aware of how this would look to the assembled crowd of business leaders and media. My mother chose this moment to intervene, her social training kicking in despite the circumstances. Audrey, darling, she said, her voice honey-sweet as she approached the podium. This is all so unnecessary. Whatever issues we've had, we're still family. We can discuss this privately. Like you discussed the loans you took out in my name? Or the lies you told the entire extended family? I asked quietly. No, Mother. We're well past private discussions. She flinched at my tone, and used to being denied her role as peacemaker and family matriarch. For a moment, I glimpsed real fear in her eyes, not just of the consequences, but of facing the truth of what they had done. From his seat at the back, my father finally stood, making his way slowly toward the front of the room. He looked older than I remembered, more frail, his confident stride replaced by a careful shuffle. Despite everything, I felt an unwelcome pang of concern. You've made your point, Audrey, he said, his voice rough but steady. You've humiliated us thoroughly. Isn't that enough? The question hung in the air between us. Was it enough? The revenge fantasy I'd occasionally indulged during my lowest moments had never included my father looking so defeated, my mother's hands trembling, or Nathan's desperate, cornered expression. But this wasn't about revenge. It had never been about revenge. This isn't about humiliation, Dad, I said, softening my tone slightly. It's about truth. It's about consequences. It's about ending a pattern that has gone on far too long. I turned back to address the full room. To the board members and investors present tonight, I want to assure you that these issues are isolated to the Chicago property and are being addressed. The Sapphire Hotel Group remains financially sound and ethically managed at the corporate level. Then I directed my attention to the hotel staff scattered throughout the ballroom. To the employees who have been affected by the toxic environment created by the Mitchell family management, I apologize. As of tonight, there will be changes. A transitional management team will arrive tomorrow. All staff will be evaluated based solely on their own merit and performance, not on their relationship with the previous management. Finally, I turned back to my family. Nathan Mitchell, you are terminated from your position, effective immediately. Security will escort you to collect your personal belongings, after which you will leave the premises. The evidence of your financial misconduct has been turned over to law enforcement. Nathan's face contorted with rage. You can't do this. You can't just. I can, and I have, I said calmly. As for you, I continued, addressing my parents, your employment will be reviewed by the transition team. Your futures with this company will depend entirely on your own actions and qualifications, not on your relationship to me. Unlike you, I don't believe in punishing people for family connections. My mother's careful composure cracked. How dare you speak to us this way, she hissed, dropping the sweet facade. After everything we've done for you. What exactly have you done for me? I asked, genuine curiosity in my voice. Discouraged my ambitions? Favored my brother at every turn? Committed fraud in my name? Please, enlighten me. She had no answer, only sputtering indignation. My father stepped forward, placing a restraining hand on my mother's arm. Audrey, he said quietly. Can we speak privately? Please? For a moment, I considered it. Despite everything, he was my father. The little girl inside me, the one who had tried so hard to earn his approval, wanted to say yes. But the woman I had become knew better. No, Dad. Whatever you have to say, you can say it here. No more secrets. No more lies. He seemed to deflate further. We needed the money, he said finally. For Nathan's practice. We thought it would work out. That we'd pay it back before you ever knew. We didn't mean to hurt you. The simplicity of his explanation, the complete absence of true remorse or understanding, was breathtaking. They hadn't meant to hurt me, they just hadn't considered me important enough to factor into their decisions at all. Intent doesn't change impact, I said quietly. And it certainly doesn't change consequences. I turned back to the assembled guests. I want to thank you all for your patience during this unexpected portion of tonight's event. The charity auction will proceed as planned, with all proceeds going to educational scholarships for hospitality workers. Please enjoy the remainder of the evening. As I stepped away from the podium, security moved in to escort Nathan from the ballroom. He went without further resistance, the fight gone out of him as the reality of his situation became clear. My parents followed, my mother's face a mask of wounded dignity, my father's shoulders slumped in defeat. The room remained silent for several long moments after their departure. Then, from somewhere near the back, a single person began to applaud. Others joined, the sound swelling until the entire ballroom was filled with applause, not the polite acknowledgement of a speech concluded, but the genuine recognition of something powerful witnessed. Board members approached to shake my hand, some apologizing for not discovering Nathan's misconduct sooner. Industry colleagues offered congratulations on both my business success and my handling of a difficult situation. Hotel staff, many of whom had suffered under Nathan's management, expressed gratitude and relief. Throughout it all, I maintained my composure, accepting each interaction with grace and professionalism. But inside, a lifetime of emotions churned: grief for the family relationships I had never truly had, relief at finally speaking my truth, determination to move forward without the weight of their expectations and judgments. As the event gradually returned to its intended purpose, the charity auction, I slipped away to a quiet corner of the mezzanine. Samantha found me there, offering a glass of champagne without a word. "Was it worth it?" she asked after a moment. I considered the question carefully. Not for the satisfaction of seeing their faces. That was actually harder than I expected. I took a sip of champagne. But for the truth? For finally being free of their narrative? For protecting my company and its employees? Yes. It was worth it. Below us, the ballroom hummed with activity, the scandal already transforming into the evening's most exclusive gossip. Tomorrow there would be logistics to handle, transitions to manage, legal proceedings to initiate. But tonight, for the first time in years, I felt unburdened. The glass house had shattered, and in its destruction, I had found liberation. The morning after the gala, I arrived at the Grand Sapphire Hotel before dawn. The lobby was quiet, the night shift employees startled to see the owner walking through at 5:30 a.m. Word of last night's revelations had spread quickly through staff channels. Their nervousness was palpable. "Good morning," I greeted the front desk clerk, a young woman whose name tag read Diane. "I hope we didn't create too much chaos for you with last night's events." "No, ma'am, I mean, Ms. Mitchell," she stammered. "Everything's been fine." I smiled reassuringly. "I'm not here to cause more disruption." Quite the opposite. "Is Jessica Parker in yet? The head of housekeeping?" Jessica arrived moments later, clearly having rushed from whatever task she'd been handling. Unlike many staff members, she met my gaze directly, without apprehension. "Thank you for your honesty during the investigation," I told her. "I'd like you to join this morning's transition meeting, if you're willing. We need people who value truth and integrity at the table." The transition meeting took place in the hotel's largest conference room. The team I'd assembled included Taylor, Martin, Samantha, and key personnel from Horizon Ventures and the Sapphire corporate office. When Jessica entered, a few executives raised eyebrows at the inclusion of a housekeeping manager, but no one commented. "Before we discuss operational matters," I began, "let's address what happened with my family. Nathan Mitchell was escorted from the property last night and is currently being interviewed by law enforcement regarding the embezzlement charges. My parents have been placed on administrative leave pending review by HR. Are you pressing charges for the identity theft and loan fraud as well?" Martin asked. I'd spent much of the night considering this question. "Yes, but with conditions that I'll discuss with the prosecutor. I'm interested in restitution and accountability, not maximum punishment." With the family matter temporarily addressed, we moved on to the hotel's immediate needs. I introduced Carson Reynolds, an experienced manager from another Sapphire property, who would serve as interim general manager. Staff evaluations would begin immediately, with an emphasis on identifying talent that had been overlooked or suppressed under Nathan's nepotistic leadership. "Jessica," I said, turning to the housekeeping manager, "would you share your perspective on the most urgent needs of the staff?" She looked surprised to be called on but recovered quickly. "Consistent scheduling is the biggest issue. Under Mr. Mitchell, favorites got preferred shifts and stable hours. Others had their schedules changed constantly, making it impossible to plan childcare or second jobs. And there's a backlog of maintenance requests that keep getting deprioritized." I nodded. "Carson, those are your first priorities. Equitable scheduling implemented by next week, maintenance backlog addressed within the month." The meeting continued, establishing clear priorities and timelines. When it concluded, most participants dispersed to begin their assigned tasks, but I asked Taylor, Martin, and Samantha to remain. "There's one more thing we need to discuss," I said once we were alone. "My parents have requested a private meeting." Absolutely not, Taylor said immediately. After everything they've done? I'm inclined to agree, Martin added. Legally, any private conversation could be problematic with pending charges. I looked to Samantha, who had remained silent. What do you think? She considered the question carefully. What do you hope to gain from such a meeting? Closure, maybe. Or at least clarity. I sighed. I spent years wondering why I was never enough for them. Maybe it's time I finally asked directly. Then I think you should meet them, Samantha said simply. But not alone, and not without parameters. That afternoon, I sat in a small meeting room off the main lobby, waiting. Martin had arranged for the conversation to be legally protected while still allowing him to be present as my counsel. Samantha waited outside, respecting the family nature of the discussion but close enough to provide support if needed. When my parents entered, the change in their demeanor was striking. Gone was my mother's social confidence, my father's authoritative presence. They looked smaller somehow, diminished by the exposure of their actions. Thank you for agreeing to see us, my father began, his voice subdued. I'm listening, I said, neither warm nor cold, simply present. My mother leaned forward. Audrey, we know we've made mistakes. Criminal fraud isn't a mistake, Mother. It's a choice. Multiple choices, made repeatedly over years. She flinched but continued. We want to make amends. We're your parents. Surely that counts for something. Does it? You've never acted like parents to me. You've acted like Nathan's parents, certainly. But to me? You've been critics, obstacles, and ultimately, criminals who stole my identity. My father cleared his throat. We never meant for it to go so far. Nathan's practice was struggling. He needed help. We thought if we could just get him through that rough patch, everything would work out. And my rough patches? Did you ever consider those worth your support? They exchanged uncomfortable glances. You were always so independent, my mother offered weakly. Nathan needed us more. No, I corrected. Nathan demanded more. I learned early that my needs were secondary, so I stopped expressing them. That's not independence, that's emotional neglect. My father shifted in his seat. What do you want from us, Audrey? An apology? Fine, we're sorry. Money? You clearly don't need it anymore. What will it take to put this behind us? His question revealed so much about their perspective, still transactional, still missing the fundamental issue. They saw this as a negotiation, not a reckoning. I don't want anything from you, I said quietly. That's what you've never understood. I wanted your support, your belief in me, your love, not as a reward for achievement or compliance, but as my birthright as your daughter. But that was never available to me, was it? My mother's eyes filled with tears, whether from genuine remorse or self-pity, I couldn't tell. We do love you, Audrey. In our way. Your way has caused immeasurable harm. Not just to me, but to Nathan too. You enabled his worst tendencies until he became a person who thought embezzlement and fraud were acceptable solutions to his problems. My father's face hardened slightly. Speaking of Nathan, what's going to happen to him? These charges could ruin his life. Of course their primary concern was still Nathan. Some patterns never change. The embezzlement charges are non-negotiable, I stated firmly. The evidence has been turned over to law enforcement, and I won't interfere with that process. As for the identity theft and loan fraud, I proposed a settlement to the prosecutor, full restitution, community service, and mandatory financial counseling. If you both cooperate fully, they may consider reducing the charges. Relief flooded their faces, not gratitude, just relief that their golden child might be spared the worst consequences. And us, my mother ventured. Our jobs? That's not my decision. Carson will evaluate all staff based on performance and qualification. If you're assets to the hotel, you'll remain employed. If not, you won't receive special treatment, positive or negative, because of your relationship to me." My father nodded slowly, seeming to accept the fairness of this approach even if it wasn't what they'd hoped for. "And our relationship? Moving forward?" I considered the question carefully. "I don't know. I can't imagine a conventional parent-child relationship given our history. But I'm open to something new, built on honesty and respect, if you're genuinely interested in that." "Of course we are," my mother said quickly, reaching for my hand across the table. I pulled back slightly. Genuine interest means actions, not words. It means accountability for past behavior. It means respecting boundaries. It means treating me as an equal adult, not as the afterthought child you can manipulate when convenient. They didn't have an immediate response to this. Perhaps the first time they'd truly been confronted with the reality of their behavior and its impact. After a moment, my father spoke. "We have a lot to think about. And apparently, a lot to make up for." "Yes," I agreed. "You do. And that process begins with accepting the legal consequences of your actions, making full restitution for the loans, and stopping the campaign of lies about me to the extended family." They agreed to these terms, though with varying degrees of apparent sincerity. As they rose to leave, my mother paused. "You've built something impressive, Audrey. The hotel. Your company. Your life." She seemed to struggle with the next words. "We should have seen your potential sooner." It was as close to a genuine compliment as she'd ever given me. I accepted it with a nod but didn't allow it to sway me from the boundaries I'd established. After they left, Samantha joined me in the meeting room. "How do you feel?" Surprisingly calm, I realized. For so long, their approval seemed essential to my worth. But sitting across from them today, I finally understood their capacity to value me has always been limited by their own issues. It was never about my worthiness at all. 6 months later, the transformation of the Grand Sapphire Hotel was complete, both literally and symbolically. The property had undergone renovations, staff morale had improved dramatically under Carson's leadership, and profits were up 22% quarter over quarter. Nathan had accepted a plea deal for the embezzlement charges, restitution, 2 years probation, and community service. My parents had faced less severe legal consequences for the identity theft, though the financial impact of restitution had forced them to downsize significantly. They remained employed at the hotel, my father in maintenance, my mother at the front desk, but our relationship remained formal and distant, more colleagues than family. The most meaningful changes, however, were in my own life. I'd stepped fully into my role as owner of the Sapphire Group, no longer hiding behind shell companies or representatives. Under my leadership, we'd acquired 3 more struggling properties and turned them around using the same principles of ethical management and employee investment that had revitalized the Chicago flagship. More importantly, I'd strengthened connections with the people who truly valued me. Samantha and I spoke daily, our mentor-mentee relationship evolving into something more akin to mother and daughter. Taylor had become both a trusted colleague and close friend. Jessica Parker had been promoted to Director of Operations for the Chicago property, bringing her frontline perspective to the executive team. I'd also reconnected with extended family members who reached out after learning the truth about the estrangement. My cousin Lily, whom I'd been close to as a child, had visited Chicago with her children, and we'd begun rebuilding our relationship. My maternal grandmother, who had always shown me kindness, called monthly now, making up for years of artificially imposed distance. Perhaps most satisfying was the mentorship program I'd established for young women entering the hospitality industry. Once a month, I met with a group of promising students and early career professionals, sharing both technical knowledge and hard-earned wisdom about navigating a challenging industry. Seeing their confidence grow, watching them advocate for themselves and their ideas, brought a fulfillment no family validation ever could. On a crisp autumn evening, I stood at the window of my office on the top floor of the Grand Sapphire, watching the sunset paint Chicago's skyline in shades of gold and crimson. Samantha joined me, handing me a glass of champagne. "What's the occasion?" I asked. The Forbes profile, she reminded me. It hit newsstands today. Audrey Mitchell, hospitality's rising star. I smiled, thinking of how desperately I had once craved such recognition, hoping it would finally make my family see me. Now, it was simply a pleasant acknowledgement of work well done. You know what the best part is? I said, turning to Samantha. I don't need this validation anymore. It's nice, but it's not why I get up in the morning. And why do you get up in the morning, Ms. Hotel Magnate? She asked with a gentle smile. I considered the question. To build something that matters. To create spaces where people feel valued. To be the kind of leader I always wished I had. I clinked my glass against hers. And to make sure no one on my watch ever feels as invisible as I once did. Later that evening, I visited the hotel's restaurant for dinner. As I waited for my table, I overheard a young server being praised by her manager for a creative solution to a guest issue. The genuine appreciation in the manager's voice, the server's quiet pride, these were the real measures of success. My family had shut me out of their hotel, not knowing I owned the whole chain. But the true victory wasn't in the revelation or the reckoning that followed. It was in breaking the cycle, in creating environments where people were valued for their contributions rather than their connections. It was in recognizing that the approval I'd sought for so long had never been mine to earn, the deficit had always been in their capacity to give, not in my worthiness to receive. As I raised my glass in a silent toast to my younger self, the determined girl who refused to give up despite every discouragement, I knew she would be proud of the woman, the leader, the person I had become. Not because I owned hotels or appeared in Forbes, but because I had finally discovered the most valuable ownership of all, the unshakable belief in my own worth. What would you do if you were in my position? Would you have confronted your family publicly, or taken a different approach? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this story of family drama and sweet karma, hit that like button and subscribe for more true stories of standing up for yourself. And don't forget to share with anyone who needs a reminder that success is the best revenge. Thank you for listening, and remember, your worth isn't determined by those who fail to see it.